Well, the theme of these Wednesday night services, the sermons in them, is 3:16. And we're looking at chapter 3, verse 16 in a variety of books in the New Testament. It comes from the fact, of course, that we all know John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. But chapter 3, verse 16, in a lot of other books is pretty cool too. And we're looking at some of those. And tonight, we're looking at 1 Corinthians 3:16. Paul writes, "Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst?" Now it strikes me that this one little verse, just this one sentence, 17 words, says an awful lot to us. First thing it says, at least to me, is that each and every one of us is very special and very important to God. I mean, think about this. You are God's temple. Not just your physical body, but everything about you. Your mind, your heart, your body, your soul, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your desires. Everything about you, everything that makes you you, is God's temple. That's pretty cool, you know. Because the temple was a really special place, especially the original temple, the one built by King Solomon. The Bible goes on and on about that first temple. It gives the exact dimensions of it, which were directed by God. It gives all the materials that the first temple was made out of, which were, again, directed by God. This first temple was made out of the best, most expensive stuff that was available to them. It was made of cedar and juniper. It was made of special stone from a special quarry. There were all sorts of ornate carvings in it. And everything was overlaid with silver and gold and bronze. And there were tens of thousands of people who worked on that first temple. It still took them 7 years to get it built. That's how incredible this place was. And of course, the cost of it was enormous. It's been estimated that in today's dollars, it would cost over $200 billion to build that temple that was built in King Solomon's time. And of course, the thing is, the Apostle Paul and the people of Corinth that he was writing to would have known all of that stuff. So what Paul was telling them, and what Paul was telling us too, is that each one of us, you and me, we're just as valuable as that temple. Each one of us is just as beautiful as that temple. Each one of us has been created out of the best stuff available. And each one of us has been made according to the exact specifications that came from God. That's pretty awesome to think about. Now, if that does not make us feel pretty good about ourselves, I'm not sure what will. To think that each one of us was made according to God's exact specifications, with as much care as it took to build the most beautiful, most expensive building that has ever existed on planet Earth. That's pretty good. But of course, there was a reason that the temple was made the way it was, and maybe you know what it is. The temple at that time was not just considered a place of worship the way the church is now. The temple was thought of quite literally as the house of God. The temple was where God lived, and that was not just a metaphor or something. They believed that literally. The temple was where God physically lived. That's why it was so important that it be built exactly the way it was. They were not just building a house of God, they were building a house for God. They wanted to build a house that was worthy of God. They wanted to build a house that was worthy of God to the extent that it is humanly possible for human beings to build that kind of a house. So when Paul says the Spirit dwells in your midst, that's not just poetry. That was not something Paul was just saying because it sounded good. Paul meant it literally. Paul was saying that just as God lives in the temple, the Spirit of God lives in each one of us. And that's a pretty awesome thing to think about too, you know. To think that God's Spirit physically lives in each one of us. That God's Spirit lives in me. That God's Spirit lives in you. That the Spirit of the Almighty, all-powerful God would live in us. That's quite an honor. That's pretty good too. But while it's a pretty awesome thing to think about, it's also a pretty awesome responsibility, Because just as the temple was made to be a house worthy of God, to the extent it's possible for humans to do that, you and I need to make ourselves worthy of God, to the extent that it's possible for us to do that. If you and I are God's temple, if God's Spirit is going to literally live in each one of us, then we need to do everything we can to be that perfect, beautiful temple that is worthy of having God live in it. So what's that mean? It means we need to take a look at every aspect of our lives. Because as I said, when Paul says that we are God's temple, Paul is talking about every aspect of our lives. Our physical body is part of it, but only a part. Our thoughts are part of it too. So are our feelings. So are our minds, our hearts, our bodies, our souls, our hopes and dreams, our fears, our desires, everything about us. Everything that makes us who we are is part of God's temple. So that means we need to make everything about us worthy of God, to the extent, again, that it's possible. Our thoughts need to be worthy of God. Our words need to be worthy of God. Our feelings need to be worthy of God. Our emotions need to be worthy of God. Our hopes and our dreams need to be worthy of God. If you and I are God's temple, everything about us needs to be worthy of God. It's a pretty tall order. I certainly have not done it. I may have had my moments. I suspect each one of us has had our moments. But I'm certainly not worthy of having God dwell in me. I don't know anyone who is. But maybe that's the point. Because as great and as fantastic as that first temple was for all the billions of dollars and all the man hours it took to build it, it still was not really worthy of being the house of God. It may have been the best, fanciest, most expensive building that ever was or ever will be, but it still was not worthy of being a place for God to live. Because it's simply not possible. No building built by human beings, no matter how much it costs or no matter how long it takes to build, can ever be worthy of being the dwelling place of the almighty, all-powerful, awesome, holy, perfect God. And no human being, no matter how good, no matter how righteous, no matter how generous or loving or caring, can ever be worthy of being the dwelling place of the almighty, all-powerful, awesome, perfect, holy God. It's simply not possible. That is, it's not possible for us. But it is possible for God. You see, God takes our best efforts and makes them better. That first temple, as great as it was not worthy of God, but God took the best efforts of the people of Israel and blessed them and made them worthy of God. And that's what God will do for us. God will take our best efforts and bless them and make them worthy of God. So our part, what we need to do in all of this, is make sure that we are giving God our best efforts. Our thoughts are not going to be worthy of God, but we need to make our best efforts to make them that way. Our words, certainly not my words, are not going to be worthy of God, but we need to make our best effort to make them that way. Our feelings, our emotions, our hopes, our dreams, none of that's going to be worthy of God, but we need to make our best efforts to make them that way. If we do, God will take our best efforts and bless them and make them worthy of God. And the best way I know to give God our best efforts in all of those ways is to spend time with God. That means prayer, of course, and it means reading the Bible, but it also, I think, means just spending some time in God's presence. Spending time thinking about who God is. Spending time thinking about all the things God does. Spending time thinking about all the times that God has been there for us. Thinking about all the gifts that God has given us. Spending time thinking about all the times that we did not get what we wanted, but later on got something better. Spending time thinking about how everything we have and everything we are comes from God. If we spend that kind of time with God, we're more likely, I think, to give God our best efforts. Not by force or obligation or anything, but because we'll want to do that. When we think about how awesome, how incredible God is, how when we think of everything that God has given us, when we think about all that, we will just naturally, I think, want to give God our best efforts. It will not feel like it's an effort at all. In fact, it'll feel like a joy to do that for God. So this week, that's what I invite each of us to do. To spend some time with God. To think about who God is and what God does. To think about all the gifts that God has given us. And then give God our best efforts. And God will bless those efforts. And God will make those efforts worthy of God. You and I are God's temple. God's Spirit dwells within each one of us. It's an incredible honor. So let's do all that we can to be worthy of it. Amen.